Hi, my name is Amy Chen Mills-Naim. It's very long. And I am a three principles trainer, coach, mentor, and have been for 30 some years now. And I'm coming to Sudbury with the gracious support of Sue Coltman, who is hosting a seminar in Sudbury, Suffolk on July 9th. It will be a day-long seminar. And then I'm going to London the next day on July the 10th to do some work for the Living Truth organization. And I believe that some of the London events will be open to the public as well. And at least the Sudbury event is sliding scale. So choose what you pay. And there are some suggested pay rates. And I'll tell you about myself. I'm well known in the Three Principles community as the daughter of Roger Mills, who did a lot of incredible community work in very low income and distressed communities across the United States. But I started in Santa Clara County, which is known as Silicon Valley in the United States. And I was trained in the county system teaching the three principles, and I was in the jails. I was working in juvenile hall. I was working in work furlough programs, which are from jail to almost free. Working in shelters for the unhoused, working in sober living environments, working with county employees. And then I started a nonprofit with my father called the Center for Sustainable Change. And getting grant money from major foundations in the United States, we did work across the United States in some of the most distressed communities of the United States. In the Mississippi Delta, which is the second poorest area of the United States after West Virginia, some of the highest negative health indices in terms of diabetes and teen pregnancy and infant mortality and so on and so forth. Also, we worked in North Carolina in an at-risk community, and we also worked in Des Moines, Iowa. We worked in San Francisco. We were everywhere. And I worked with my father quite a bit, and our outcomes were remarkable. We had decreased violent crime rates and increased student participation in school and decreased use of medication, psychotropic medications, just remarkable results. And the work was always so, so touching to me, to work with people and see people have insights and to have insights myself in the midst of my work. My father passed in 2010, a year after Sydney Banks passed. And I also have a background in journalism. I'm also very engaged in my community. I ran for office in my community. I do journalistic writing and I serve with the Democratic Central Committee. I was elected into the Democratic Central Committee in my community, and I'm also an activist. So um, I happen to also be working on a book called Deep Resilience. I have two other books, one for youth called The Spark Inside, and one for educators called State of Mind in the Classroom that I wrote with my father. Um, but this book I'm writing is about the state of the world that we're in now and how we can find deep resilience in the midst of crises. And I looked up the root of the word crisis or crises, and it means tipping point. It means that things could go one way or another, and a lot of that right now depends on how we as a global society choose to respond to what's happening in the world. Now, some of us need to focus within, and I get that 100%. So if you are someone who just needs to focus within, you are welcome to these events, and we will be talking about how to gain more understanding and more peace of mind and more compassion and more insight in one's life, regardless. And if you are someone who is looking out at the world, we just launched apparently a war with Iran from the United States, and there's a lot going on here. As a journalist, I track it all very closely. There's a lot to grapple with right now. Even if you don't agree with people on the other side of politics from you, you can probably agree that we are deeply divided. And how do we get past these divisions? How do we have the conversations that need to be had? How do we listen deeply to each other? That's part of what I'm interested in talking about, but I am really interested in talking about whatever you want to talk about. So I will introduce or reintroduce the three principles that underlie what I call deep resilience, or our capacity for peace of mind, wisdom, insight, grounding, and love in our personal lives and in our civic lives and in our global lives, or in the world, let's say. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to reintroduce, but then I also want to talk about the places where we get stuck in our thinking about those principles. And I'll just give you one example. So there's this idea in the three principles community, and three principles is a psychology that I teach, uh, that there are levels of consciousness. And that's true. What that means is the more we look at our own thinking and transcend our personal habits of thought that are not useful or helpful, that have kept us in loops of negativity, of self-judgment, of judgment of others, the more we let go of those, or the more those let go of us, the more our quote level of consciousness rises. But what I'm more interested in, and we can talk about levels of consciousness, but what I'm more interested in is what is always here. There's another spiritual teacher besides Sydney Banks that I love, and her name is Gangaji. And that's a question she asks a lot. She's asked that to me directly. What is always here? And I had to reflect on that. And what it did for me when she asked me that directly was to consider what has always been here with me, what is not actually related to levels of consciousness, what is before levels of consciousness. And that is the innate mental health, the wisdom, the deep silence, the peace that pa- passeth understanding, that is the background of our mental lives, if that makes sense. That has always been with us. And one of the things I'm really interested in is helping people take more responsibility for what they already are and what they already have. All this goodness and wisdom and this flow of thinking, this universal thought, this original thought, this new thought that is always with us if we just take just a little bitty step out of the way. And then we're living a life that Sydney Banks talked about as a life of no thought, interacting with people and in situations with no thought, meaning there's no preconceived thinking in the interaction. We are flowing. We are flowing with life. We are letting life flow through us and riding the wave of life. And that can take us anywhere. It can take us anywhere as we respond to the world as it is today. It can take us in directions that we wouldn't have expected, that maybe don't even fit, the the parameters of our spiritual communities or our political communities or our communities, like that's really the joy and the adventure of tapping into our innate and deep resilience. So I hope this is all making sense. I told Sue I would make this as a promotion for the events, and so that's what I'm doing. Um, the other thing I want to say about what's happening in the world today, because it's hitting me quite profoundly. My husband is actually Israeli. We have a lot of family members there. There's been a lot going on there. There's been a lot of division in my community. And now, the United States has become involved, and we have a lot going on here in the United States with our government and just incredible amounts of what I see as cruelty and oppression and repression starting to happen in the United States. And what's been occurring to me, and this may sound strange, is that we're all a little bit, at least in the States, and I know there are other countries that have it much worse even at this time, right? But in the States, it's such a huge country, it has so much influence, like it seems highly relevant to me to be paying attention, of course, and I live here. And what's occurring to me is that we're all a little bit closer to death. And I don't mean that in a negative way, although it can sound negative. What I mean is that we're a little bit closer to things really not going the way we had hoped in our country, in our lives, and possibly very bad things happening. They are happening to people here. Um, and what that means for me is that our challenge is to go deeply within, like more deeply than we ever have. And that means letting go of life as we know it. And that means, in some ways, facing a certain kind of death. And I have found that the more I contemplate that, the more I am at peace with what's happening in the world, the more I can be more present. Because, life is short. Sydney Banks used to say that quite a bit. Sydney Banks was the founder of the three principles. He used to say that quite a bit. Life is short. And we have one life to live, as far as we know. At least we know we have this life to live. And what we do with it, no matter our circumstances, no matter what's happening in the world, no matter if the world is ending or not, that is our business. And everything else is kind of like not our business. It is my hope and prayer that as each person finds what is theirs to do in this lifetime, and they follow the callings of their own hearts, that their impact in the world will be incredibly positive, incredibly loving, incredibly supportive, incredibly creative, incredibly everything, everything that we need. And if we can all do this, follow our wisdom, and that for some people means taking a step back and actually taking their heads out of everything that's happening in the world and tending to their closer relationships or tending to their own mental health. I don't know what it means for you because you are unique. Your situation is unique. And only your wisdom can tell you how to move. So I'm here to facilitate your wisdom in Sudbury, in London, and that is my joy, and that is my pleasure, and that is my privilege. So if you can come and join me for information, you can go to my website www.amychen, AMICHEN.com, amychen.com. Or you can email Sue Coltman directly. I don't have a lot of information right now about the London event, but you can email Sue Coltman at SUE Coltman, COLTMAN.com. And she will get you the information that you need and help you to register. And I hear that Sudbury is very charming and has lots of places to go and stroll and eat lunch. And so I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to being back in England and seeing old friends. And I hope that you will come and see me, whether you're an old friend or a new friend. Okay. Thank you so much.